So, the next chapter that we are going to study is the nervous system. So, I think we all know about what is the main function of our nervous system. It helps us to perceive the world around us, it helps us to feel the sense of touch, smell, sight, etc. So, why is this nervous system essential? Nervous system is present in almost every organism. Maybe for some organisms it is a little complicated, and for some organisms it is very simplified. So, what is the essentiality of the nervous system? It keeps us informed about the outside world through the sense organs. As we know that the sense organs are a very important part of the nervous system. So, using these sense organs, we can understand the outer world in a much better way. So, nervous system is associated with that itself. Enables us to remember, to think, and to reason out. Whatever thoughts we have, whatever type of ability we use for solving a mathematical question or for remembering things, that is done by our brain. And we know brain is also an integral part of the nervous system. So, nervous system is associated with memory and also the skills. Next is controls and harmonizes all voluntary muscular activities. Whatever we do knowingly, the voluntary actions, that is also controlled by our nervous system. We are able to speak, we are able to write something, we are able to hold a book in our hand. This requires muscles, isn't it? So the muscle activity is also controlled by the nervous system. It regulates into involuntary activities also. So what are involuntary activities? Activities which are not controlled by us. For example, release of digestive juices by our stomach, or the process of digestion, or the process of heartbeat. We cannot control it, isn't it? So that is also maintained by the nervous system itself. So, like we have studied in the previous chapter, that the unit of a kidney was nephron, or uriniferous tubules. Similarly, our nervous system also has some unit in the sense they are the nervous system is composed of many cells, and that smallest unit or that particular cell is known as a neuron or a nerve cell. So I guess we all more or less know about the structure of neuron. We have studied about it in the lower classes. So we are going to learn about these in details. So the nerve cells are also known as neurons. So what is the structure of neuron? As you can see in the second page, is the structure of neuron given to us. In the beginning, there is a body which consists of a nucleus at the center. And from there you can see there are a lot of branch structures coming out, which are known as dendrons, and the further smaller ones are known as dendrites. Then the upper part, the spherical part, is known as a perikaryon or cyton, very essential name for exam point of view. Then from the cyton arises a very long structure, a long thread like structure, which is known as axon. The axon is surrounded by some extra cells which contains nucleus, it contains neurolemma. We are going to learn about what are these. And the axon ends in again another branch which is known as axon endings. So these axon endings and these dendrites are responsible for transmission of information from one part of the body to another. Which one is associated with what, we are going to learn. So let us see what are the main parts of a neuron. The cell body, or the perikaryon, or the cyton. It contains a well-defined nucleus surrounded by granular cytoplasm. The cytoplasm inside inside the cyton consists of granules. It is not clear. It has all the cell organelles like other cells, only centrosome is absent because nerve cells have lost the ability to divide. Very important point. Nerve cells have all the different organelles like mitochondria or Golgi apparatus, etc. But it does not have centrosome. As you know, centrosome is associated with cell division. But nerve cells once formed will never divide again. So as a result, there is no centrosome present in the nerve cell. Next, we talk about those small branches which I told you about, dendrites. These are branched cytoplasmic projections of the cell body. They conduct nerve impulses to the cyton. So, they are actually responsible for bringing information to the nerve cell, to the main body of the nerve cell. Next is the axon, which is the long thread-like structure, like I told you. In most neurons, the axon is surrounded by a white insulating sheet. Insulating in the sense it protects the nerve cell from any sort of damage. It also provides a sort of insulation, a covering. It is known as a myelin sheath. which is covered by an outermost thin sheath called neurolemma. These are basically the coverings or the membranes outside the nerve cell. As you know, nerve cells are very important parts of our nervous system, and if one of them gets damaged, they will not be repaired or they will not be formed again. So as a result, it is very essential that they are protected nicely. The myelin sheath shows gaps throughout the length. As you can see, there are small gaps in between. These are known as nodes of Ranvier. Next, there are some basic terms in nervous activity, all of which is very essential. Questions might be asked for 1 marks from this topic. So what is a stimulus? Stimulus is anything in our surrounding which creates a change in our body. So if there is a hot object nearby, we will remove our hand from that place. So the hot object is a stimulus. It is making our nervous system understand that we have to stay away from it. Response is what is happening in our body. What we were doing, we were removing our hand. So this is the response. Impulse, a wave of irritability or the electrical disturbance that sweeps over a nerve cell. So how does this information pass? It is like an electric signal. So this electric signal is known as impulse. So there are 2 more topics, receptor and effector. So these are very much closely associated with one another. So let us consider the example of a hot object. So when we try to bring our hand or we even touch that hot object, what happens? We can feel that it is hot. So where are we receiving the stimulus? On our skin. So our skin is the group of cells which is observing that stimulus, observing the change in our environment. So our skin will be called the receptor in this case. The nerve cell starting from the cell will transmit this information to the brain, and the brain will again send an information to some muscles so that we can remove our hand or we can do the work which is essential at that moment. So in this case, in the case which I told you, you will remove your hand as soon as you are touching the hot object. So how are you understanding that you have to remove your hand? From the skin, the information is going to the brain. The brain is again giving an information to the muscles in your hand to move your hand away. So the muscle is the effector because it is getting affected. It is doing some change, and receptor is the one which is feeling any change in sensation. So next is the transmission of a nerve impulse. So how does the information from our skin reach our brain? How does this entire thing happen? So what happens? Outside the axon, there are a lot of sodium ions. So what happens as soon as any sort of change occurs, be it heat, be it electrical, or be it mechanical, any sort of change occurs outside in our outside environment, the axon at that particular point can easily accept the Na plus ions. The Na plus ions, the sodium ions, will move into the axon. So what happens? The outer part is now free of any sodium ions. So this procedure is known as depolarization. There are no ions on the surface, so the portion gets depolarized. Initially, when the ions were present in the normal condition, that was called polarized condition. As soon as we are having any change in the surrounding, and we are able to feel it through any of our skin cells or any of our other cells, so at that particular position, the axon will accept all the sodium ions into itself, and the upper side of the axon, or you can say the outside of the axon, will have no sodium ions. So this condition is known as depolarization. So in this way it goes on. It is not a very simple and single process. It will go on throughout the entire length of the axon. It will travel, and there is polarization, there is depolarization, and there is again repolarization. Again the sodium ions will come back to the surface when the stimulus has moved from that position to the next position. So it moves very slowly. It seems like that, but it is a very quick process. So a question might come that which ions are responsible for the transmission of impulse? So the answer will be sodium ions. This is the reason why this entire procedure of transmission of a nerve impulse is also known as sodium pump, because sodium is moving in, it is coming out. So this entire process can be termed to be a sodium pump. In this way, nerve impulses are passed from one part of our body to the brain, and from the brain again back to some muscles. So it is very quick, although it is not as quick as electricity, but still it is very quick, because as soon as you touch something, you are able to make some changes immediately, right? So it is a very quick process, and it is actually done by sodium ions. There are 2 topics given in your book. One is the synapse and one is the synaptic cleft. So these are 2 different terms. So what are these? Let's see. Synapse is the point of contact between the terminal branches of the axon of a neuron, axon's end point, and the dendrites. So the point of contact, as you can see in the figure, there is no physical contact. There is no touching in between, but they are transferring information from one part to another. So that is known as synapse. So there are two synapses. So you can see that entire connection is known as synapse, and the gap in between the axon ending and the dendrite, that is known as synaptic cleft. So these are two completely different terms, so don't get confused. So what happens, there is a chemical which is responsible for the transfer of the signal from one neuron to another. Obviously there is not a single neuron which is running from our fingertip to our brain. There are a group of neurons. So how do messages pass from one neuron to another? There is a chemical called acetylcholine. Underline it in your book. This chemical is released during this time, and this chemical helps in setting up a new impulse, a new you can say an electric signal, which is transferred from one neuron to another. So this is also an important question, which chemical is responsible for transmission of nervous impulses. It will be acetylcholine. So there are major three types of neurons which we'll learn about: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and association or connecting neurons. Very important. What is their major role? We are going to learn about that. Sensory neurons convey the impulse from the receptor, that is from the sense organ, to the main nervous system, to our brain. So when I am touching some hot object, the neuron which is transferring that signal from my hand to the brain, that is a sensory neuron, because it is starting with the sense organ. So sensory neuron. Now what is the motor neuron? Motor neurons are the ones which are carrying the information from the brain and it is giving it to our muscle, that you have to remove your hand. So the information which is coming from our brain to our hand, that is done by the motor neuron. Next, association or connecting neurons. As the name suggests, it is connecting both the types of neurons. It is connecting the sensory and the motor neurons together. So this is the work of the association or connecting neurons. Next we have what are nerves. We keep on saying this term nerves. What are nerves? When there are a lot of axons together, these axons, as you can see in the figure, that black colored line, when there are a lot of nerve fibers or axons together, they are enclosed in a tubular sheet, again for the requirement of protection. So that bundle of a lot of nerve fibers are known as nerves. So nerves are basically a collection of many neurons together. Neurons in the sense only that axon part, not the entire part. So there are three types of nerves. Once again, same. Neurons and nerves are no different. Neurons is single unit, nerves are a lot of neurons together. Similarly, there are three types of nerves. So it has the same role as the neurons. So sensory nerves are the ones which are present in our sense organ, and it is moving the impulse from the sense organs to our brain. For example, a very good example would be the optic nerve, which is located in our eye, and it is carrying the information from our eye to the brain. Next is the motor nerves, the bundle of neurons which are connecting the brain and the muscle, and accordingly the muscle will move by getting information from the brain. And like we studied just now, that association neurons are interconnecting both the neurons. Similarly, mixed nerves are the group of nerves which contain both type of nerves, sensory nerves and motor nerves. So nerves are nothing but the group of axons together. And we are going to come across another term, ganglia. Ganglia are nothing but group of the cell bodies of the nervous cell. That means you can say group of cytons. Okay, that is known as ganglion, and group of axons are known as nerves.